Darrel, how about go ahead and tell us your story? No, you're all set. Just talk.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Derrel Behrendsen. I was born just a short time ago on August the 20th, 1931. That made me 91 years old last week. I was born between Yuma and Otis, Colorado, just north of Highway 34, on a farm. My folks lived there. I went to school where there were 6 kids in school. My brother, my sister, and a neighbor boy and 2 neighbor girls. The teacher's name was Larry and Judy. We walked 3/4 of a mile to school, and for the first few years. Then the folks moved, and we lived 2 miles from school, 1 mile through the pasture, where we had to open 2 gates to keep the cattle from getting out. When the horses stopped, we knew we were home. In 1947, they sold the farm, and we moved to Aurora, Colorado. There I held numerous jobs until 1949, when I joined the Navy Reserves out at Buckley Field. They didn't have any boot camps out there, but one of the first jobs I had was to mop and scrub the floors in an old barracks. I had to buff it. I had never even had a buffer in my hand, but I turned that on, and if for you people who have used a buffer, it took off. I knocked a hole in the wall. After that, I joined the regular Navy. That was in 49. In 50, I joined the regular Navy. When I got up in the boot camp, they gave me my discharge. It was a general discharge, not an honorable. I couldn't understand why I got a general discharge instead of an honorable. I was told because I didn't turn in my uniform. I didn't know I had to turn in my uniform from the reserves to go into the regular Navy. But anyway, I then went up to the Great Lakes for my boat training. After that, I caught the troop train, went to Norfolk, Virginia, and there I caught another one down to Charleston, South Carolina, where my ship was being put back in commission. I boarded that, and then from then on the John W. Weeks, the DD 701, I spent 17 months aboard that ship. 17 months I was seasick when I was out to sea. After we made 2 trips to Cuba, 31 foreign ports, just from one island to the next. Made 3 trips to Cuba. One of them, we were turned over to the U.S. Marines to teach us again how to march. We marched in a parade there in Cuba for the honoring the Red Cross, and from then back aboard the ship, and we joined the 6th Fleet to go overseas. During that trip, they made me helmsman of the ship. I didn't know what I was doing, just standing there. I asked them for instructions. Well, just do what that ship ahead of you is doing, and do whatever they do. So the ships all turned to the right. I turned to the right. Now instead of being in back of them, I'm alongside of them. And then I caught heck up for that. But you know, experience is a good teacher. I was the helmsman of that ship for the 17 months I was aboard it. We got to see all of these foreign ports, like in the Mediterranean, on up into Germany, through the Kiel Canal, into a little island 80 miles off the coast of Russia. There, the island was owned by Denmark, but it was just 80 miles off the coast of Russia. So the Russian ships followed us in there during the daytime. Night we could see them flashing their lights. So next day, instead of spending 3 days there, we left and went into Copenhagen, Denmark. Probably the best town I was in. The little kids would come down to the dock, wanted to know if they could buy us some milk and Danish pastry. We said no, because you give them money, they're on the dock and you're on the ship. And after a little bit, we trusted them. They never cheated us a bit. But the time I was there, met a couple of Danish Navy nurses, and we danced with them at night. They asked us to go to church with them on Sunday. We turned that down because we didn't speak Danish, and they said it was an English-speaking church, so we went to church with them. A tremendous trip. Really enjoyed Denmark. If I went back, that would be one of the places I'd like to go back to. After that, we'll get into an incident at the sea, but I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We went to, got involved with a video that I'll show you in a little bit, and during that trip, I've had enough. Give me a transfer. I get any place in Germany, any place in Europe, but get me off of this ship. When we got back in the port, they said that my transfer came through. Where am I going? Well, you're going to Bermuda. Bermuda? What is that? Well, that's an island, 21 square miles. Why do I want to go there? Then I questioned some people. They said it was a resort. So I got transferred there. I was in the gunnery department, hoeing weeds up in the magazine area and places. There were 15 of us in that gunnery division. I took the test for a third-class petty officer. Out of the 15, I was the only one that made it. Now, I didn't want to hoe weeds anymore, so I asked for a transfer to Hamilton, Bermuda, where I was put on shore patrol for 3 months. 3 months passed. I asked for an extension. I spent the next time in the service in Bermuda, living in a hotel, and finally rented a house. And while I was there, I met a lady from England. We spent quite a bit of time together. After I got out of the service, we continued communicating back and forth. Then I met a woman in January the 21st of 1956, and I married her. And in the meantime, this lady over in England, I was still writing to her, communicating with her. And then the wife and I got to talking to her. She'd call us every Saturday, talk for 2 hours. We finally asked her if you have money that you're able to pay for all of this? Well, I got a little bit. How much is a little bit? Well, I got 15 million pounds. 15 million pounds, that's at that time was worth $2 a pound, $30 million. We communicated until last year when she passed away. She told me that she had 2 crates of Egyptian gold coins that belonged to her dad. I says, I sure hope you got them insured. No, why not? If I insure them, then the government's going to know I got them. They don't know that at this point. So anyway, if she'd have lived, who knows what happened. Maybe I'd have had that $30 million, we'd all go out to supper. My life has been extremely good at points. Most of it has been good. During the war, living on the farm, we had the German prisoners picking corn for us. The Mom made some donuts, made coffee, brought out to the field for the prisoners. The guards told us they could not let them accept that coffee and donuts. And the folks raised heck. If they're going to pick our corn, they're going to have coffee and donuts. So at lunchtime, the guards gave the guns and shells to the prisoners. And then they went to the house and had lunch with us. The prisoners were kept in the fairgrounds, and at night they would take those rabbits and pheasants and stuff that they shot and cook them for supper. One of those guards, or one of those prisoners, was named Walter, 15 years old. Where's that kid going to go? If you know, he probably doesn't have any money. Here he's in the center of the United States. But it was interesting to work with those prisoners. They get cold, and I was driving a tractor. Pretty soon we'd stop. They'd gather around the tractor and try to warm up. After the folks sold the farm in '47, I joined the Navy Reserves, as I told you. And then I wanted to join the Denver Police Department. I couldn't because I did not have a high school diploma. I went to high school for 6 weeks. The teachers kept saying, "Why don't you like your brother and sister?" They were number 1 and 2 in high school. I got so tired of that, I just told the folks, "Come to town and get me. I'm coming home." "No, you're not." I had bought 3 sheep and had a little colt, horse. When they sold the farm, they kept the money from that. I never got a penny of it. They kept their word. They were going to take everything I had if I quit school. I quit. I wanted to join the Denver Police Department, but I did not have that high school diploma. So I went down to Opportunity School and told them I wanted to take a test to get my GED. "Well, you got to go to class first." "No, I don't want to go to class. Just give me the test." They gave me the test and I passed it. Back up a little bit. In Bermuda, when I took that test for the 3rd class petty officer, 15 of us took the test. The only one that passed was me. I had the guardian angel watching over me a lot of times. But anyway, when I joined the Denver Police Department, I was there just a short while, and they asked me to put together a convention of the city council people and others. I didn't know how to put a convention together, but they assigned me, and that's what I did. Then later on, they had the International Police Chiefs Convention, roughly 9,000 and some chiefs from throughout the world. I was one of 3 assigned to put that convention together. A lot of those chiefs could not even speak English. How are they going to learn anything at a convention? I did that, and then after I retired, the mayor asked me to come back to work to host the U.S. Mayor's Conference. "Mayor, I'm not a city employee anymore." "Well, come on back. I will get you a car." He went out to Dean Buick's. He got me a brand new Buick to drive. Then I couldn't gas it because I wasn't a city employee. So as mayor, he changed the rules. Now I could gas the vehicle in a city facility. I did that all by myself. And just, as I say, I've had a good life. I wrote 2 books, The Guidelines to the Handling of Hazardous Material, and then a lot of my off-duty work was within bars. I got to check at IDs. I could pick out an ID that was phony, and if not, I could ask them questions. What was your mother's maiden name? They'd show me a birth certificate. Majority of those kids didn't know what their mother's maiden name was because it was not their birth certificate. So I wrote a book on that. The one on driver's license, I had a driver's license from every province in Canada, everyone in the United States. And the state of Colorado took my book to Grand Junction to show the bar owners over there what to look for. And to copyright something, you have to have two of them. One of those books got away from them and wound up in California. Now my book is being printed and sold in California. The second one, the guidelines to the handling of hazardous material, I copyrighted that. I have 3 worldwide copyrights on it. I got a lot of invitations to go to different towns and states and train people. It got so bad, the department just got tired of giving me permission to go. So they wrote a letter that I could go any place I wanted to go so long as my expenses were paid. I traveled the United States. I had a man from England come over and go through my program. I had a man from Johannesburg, South Africa, come up and just sit and listen to me. I had 100 and some Canadians come down, go through it, not all at one time, but maybe 3 to 5 at a time. I had, I think it was 17 Louisiana State Patrolmen, same way, come up and go through it. One time we went up over what's the pass out of up on top they got a store, and we went up there that had 2 marked Louisiana State Patrol cars. One of them was marked, and we got up there. Some guy walked up to the car. What are you guys doing up here? Well, we started chasing a trucker in Louisiana. We hadn't caught him yet. But it's just some of the things that I got involved with. Later on, there was a company out of Portland, Oregon. Got an invitation to come up into the headwaters down just south of the Canadian borders, a major river. That river had ice 3 feet thick. They wanted to know how they had a pipeline they had lost it. They didn't know where it was, but they knew that someday that pipeline of oil is going to break. How do we get the oil out from under that ice? I spent the days up there with them learning, and now I'd be comfortable in training people how to get ice or oil out from under 3 feet of ice. It's just another thing that I've got involved with. As I say, the department, after I wrote the book on the guidelines to the handling hazardous material, they made me Safety Man of the Year for the state of Colorado. The only person outside of industrial safety to ever get that award.
That's quite an honor.
It's
How about tell us
a man that I got involved with was King Hussein of Jordan. He came up to Colorado to he bought some jets, fighters. We took him out to Buckley Field. They brought in that jet. He walked around it. Pretty soon he went in and changed clothes, came out in a flight suit, got up in that jet and took off by himself. Later on, we took him to the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs. They had 200 people coming in there for him for lunch. He didn't want to go there, and He wound up just going up to a room and having hamburgers. There, he wanted us to go out on the highway and stop these 200 people from coming down there because he didn't want to be with them. We stayed with him all day long and then brought him back to Denver. I was riding motorcycles at that time, and our motorcycles did not have the gas tanks large enough to get us to Colorado Springs and back. So we parked them outside of Denver and got in a patrol car going down there. Then the state patrol chief kept telling them, speed up. They told him that the police car wouldn't go any faster. Well, it would have. So coming back, I said I would drive. And our bikes were sitting just outside of Englewood alongside of Highway 85. We needed to get up there because those bikes had been there all day long, or they're going to start by the time we sat there all day. So when we left Castle Rock, I tried to call the Denver police dispatcher to ask for additional motorcycles to come out and help me get the rest of the convoy back into Denver. They couldn't hear me because radio communication was not that good back in those days. Finally, my brother-in-law was a dispatcher, and he recognized my voice. So when I went around that convoy to get ahead of them, to get my motorcycle started again and get back out on the interstate, I was doing just over 100 miles an hour. And we got the bike started, and when we pulled into the Brown Palace Hotel, we were the only motorcycles there. The rest of them hadn't even caught us yet. You don't spend any time sitting out there. Another man that I escorted was Hugh Thant, the Secretary of the United Nations. A wonderful man. I escorted virtually every president at that time. The one that I enjoyed the most was Eisenhower. I got acquainted with him because his mother-in-law lived in the 700 block of Lafayette Street. I'd go up there and at night take him to the Brown Palace Hotel. I got acquainted with him. When Mrs. Dowd, Mamie's mother, died, we took her body out to Fairmont Cemetery. When we left there, we took a different route down Holly Street. I looked in my mirror. I didn't have the convoy behind me. They had stopped. So I made a U-turn, went back, and Ike and Mamie are standing out on the parking area between the sidewalk and curb, arguing like mad. She wanted to go back to the cemetery. He didn't. So just goes to show, even as president, you can argue with your wife. I escorted Truman. He was not president. That was before my time. But he came to Denver for a convention. That man, we'd see him walking down maybe 15th Street, 16th, 5 o'clock in the morning. No guards around him. But back in those days, I don't think they had the Secret Service. He just didn't have all of the guards that they have today. One of the presidents, in fact, all of them that I was involved with, I'd sit out at Stapleton Airport waiting for the plane to land. I'm sitting there on the motorcycle right in front of the president's limo, and I always was the lead escort. And this today, the Secret Service came up. Darrel, you're not on the lead today. You're bringing up the rear. I couldn't understand that. Why am I bringing up the rear? I'm always in the front. Well, we took off, and every little bit on the way out to DU, that convoy would stop. We'd never stop. Once we take off, we continued. But this convoy would stop every little bit. So when we were all through, I asked why. Well, don't you know that this president has the limo rigged up to where he can stop and hear what the people are saying on the sidewalk? Now I know why I was pulled off of that escort. He heard what I said, that someday they're going to prove that he had something to do with Kennedy's death. So just be careful when you're around these government vehicles. I retired January the 3rd of 56. As I said, January the 21st, I met a wonderful woman that I married September the 9th of 56. We had two wonderful daughters. I lost her, and now I reside out here at 36th and Sheridan. I met a wonderful woman there, Linda. She's sitting right behind you here. So that's my current. We're not getting married, but I guess if there's any questions, I could answer you.
Could you tell us a little bit about your...
I lost my hearing in the Navy. I fired those 5-inch guns all the time, and so I've got hearing aids, but I can't hear you. So if there's any questions, maybe get the questions passed on to me.
For Oldsmobile. How about tell us about your modeling stint? How were you picked up to be a model?
What?
How were you selected to become a model? Remember, for Oldsmobile and Miller Stockman?
My question is, how did I become a model?
Yeah.
I didn't tell you this. I was a model for Miller Stockman in their catalog 2 different years. I was a model for the Oldsmobile company. How did I get this? Well, one day I got a radio call, the report to the captain in headquarters. I went in, he asked me what size shirt I wore. What size shirt? Sports shirt or dress shirt? I asked you what size shirt you wore. So I tried to explain to him. Then I was invited to Colorado Springs to Alexander Studios to go down there for an interview. I went down, the only thing I did was try on a cap. Anyway, I was hired to be those models. Big deal. I used to get a free catalog. Never got a free Oldsmobile. But as I say, you could probably gather, I've had one hell of a life. Great for the majority of the time, times not. One of the reasons I had such a good life, I told you I met this woman 21st of January 56. I married her September the 9th of 56. That woman, my notes I took in the Police Academy, I turned those in, they wrote good. After she got through with it, they scratched that out and put excellent. Why? She changed it, typed it all up in a beautiful folder. That lady made me what I am today. Everything I am, I can trace back to her. Wonderful woman. Okay?
Well, we have a video of the experience Darrell had with his destroyer in helping the USS Flying Enterprise. So we'll go ahead and show that. And then you may have some other questions for Darrell after that.
This video you're about to see is of the Flying Enterprise. When we were in France, New Year's Eve of 50, we got a call that the ship was sinking off the coast of England. I was on the fantail of the ship trying to set up a movie, and on New Year's Eve, I heard the announcement over the PA system, go to your stations, all the special sea detail. That means you're sailing up the lines. We're going to sea. Half of the crew was in town. We couldn't have gone if we wanted to. They sent people into town to try to locate those people. Then they found out we didn't have much fuel. Also, half of the crew was gone, so they sent people in to look for them. The tide was out. Everything was against us. But we took off the next day, went out just south of Aylen, and joined the ship that was sinking. When I opened up the hatch that morning, look out, all I could see was the bottom of that ship laying on its side. As I say, I was the helmsman of the ship. I couldn't steer that ship. I kept, when it rolls, that reel has only got so much that you can hang on to. So I asked them to weld a holder up on the overhead so I could stand there and hang on to that with one hand and steer with the other hand. But for 2 or 3 days, we just circled that ship. Then our sister ship, the USS Keith, came out and relieved us. We went in to play with England, and the captain put fenders in to keep the ship away from the dock so the people couldn't jump from the dock to the ship. He asked for volunteers to go into town to get the mail. I've always been one to volunteer. I went in, got the mail, came back, and they had the gates locked so we couldn't get aboard the base. But there's all of these thousands of reporters out there. When they let us in, they jumped on the running board, and we got them back off of there. And you remember back in those days, they put the movie projectors on the roof of the cars. He let those people in first so that they could put their cars near the ship. And then we cleaned up the ship a little bit, and he gave his lecture. But we were warned that if we talked to anybody, he would file charges against us. I was one of them that took videos, and you'll see a part in this video. I swear that's mine. There's no way I could prove it. They asked me if they wanted to buy it. Well, what are you going to pay? Well, we got to see what you got first. That's the last I saw of that film. But I bet you that that's mine, what you see. And that is my supervisor and others were stuffing 5-inch powder cases, like magazines, food, all of this stuff, so that the captain aboard this ship that was sinking would have something. But I'll never know, is that mine or theirs, okay?
Rescuing the Flying Enterprise was to be more difficult. There were some 15 ships in the western approaches clamoring for help, but there were only 3 ocean-going large rescue tugs available. The Dutch tug Zwarte Zee was recovering another ship. Her sister tug Oceaan was therefore hastily engaged. Unfortunately, Zwarte Zee got into trouble, colliding with another ship, and Oceaan had to go to her rescue. This left just the British tug, Turmoil, which was towing a vessel to Falmouth. She agreed to help once she had completed this. It would be 3 or 4 days before she could reach the stricken Flying Enterprise. The story of the Flying Enterprise will continue. On the 2nd of January, 1952, the American destroyer Weeks took over the escort of the debilitated ship Flying Enterprise. Concerned about Captain Carlson, Weeks' captain tried to persuade him to abandon the Flying Enterprise to the greater comfort of his ship. But Carlson was more worried about his ship's papers.
There's my crew.
The crew now prepared to transfer hot coffee, sandwiches, and reading material to Carlson. They did this by firing a line across. Carlson, who had been subsisting on just cake and tea made by boiling water over a candle, was deeply grateful. In the meantime, Southland had now arrived at the Dutch port of Rotterdam and landed Flying Enterprise's passengers and crew, whom she had rescued. With the barometer now falling once more, a cable from Hans Behrendsen, owner of the Flying Enterprise, told Carlson to put his own safety ahead of that of the ship, which, under salvage laws, he could now abandon, as a rescue had been organized. Carlson replied that he would stay with the vessel until she reached port, or sank. The tugboat Turmoil was now on her way, but her crew was very tired. She eventually reached the Flying Enterprise late on the 3rd of January, amid rising seas. The tug's skipper, Dan Parker, realized that no time could be lost. He told Carlson that since the Flying Enterprise was down by the bows, he would tow her stern first. Carlson would have to catch and secure the messenger line on his own, since it was too dangerous to try to put a member of the tug's crew aboard. But the tow line kept breaking as the wind and waves forced the two vessels apart. Parker therefore tried to secure the tow line to the bows, but again without success. While Carlson rested in his radio cabin, the tug rigged fresh gear and came in again. Suddenly the vessels touched, and in an instinctive impulse, Turmoil's mate, Kenneth Dancy, leaped aboard Flying Enterprise. The morning of Saturday, the 5th of January, revealed an improvement in the weather, in spite of the presence of persistent drizzle and fog. The tow was finally secured, and Dancy elected to remain with Carlson. Parker now set course for Falmouth, 350 miles away. He knew that the voyage would be difficult. Even in the calmest seas, they would be unable to steam at more than 4 knots. There was, too, the ever-present danger that Flying Enterprise might well capsize, unless he was very careful. Throughout Sunday and Monday, they edged ever closer to Falmouth, with the American destroyer following close at hand. In Falmouth, excitement was beginning to mount. The world's press were gathering in the little port. Preparations were also being made to give Carlson and the crew of Turmoil a hero's welcome. All now depended on the weather. King Frederick of Denmark sent a personal telegram to Carlson via the Danish naval attaché in London. Carlson's parents were flown in from Copenhagen in order to greet their son on his arrival in port. Vessels set out to give personal encouragement to Carlson and the Turmoil, while numerous aircraft circled above them. But on Tuesday afternoon, the wind freshened considerably to almost gale force. Captain Parker headed for the Scilly Isles in order to ride it out. Late that night, the weather moderated, and Turmoil was once more able to take the strain. But the waiting crowds now heard bad news. The tow had snapped. It was still dark, however, and nothing could be done until daybreak. When this came, Carlson and Dancy crawled out to inspect the damage. They found a buckled quick-release shackle, which would have to be cut free before the tow could be resecured. drenched by the sea, and with only a hacksaw blade to work with, it took some 3 hours to free the shackle. By then the sea was too rough to secure another tow, and so they retreated to the cabin to dry off. A newsreel reporter sent this account from an aircraft overhead.
There is no tow rope on board. The sea is breaking right across her deck, as it slants, of course, steeply up from the water. I do not see how anybody could be out on that deck. I do not see at the moment how any tow line could be got aboard it, because I don't see how anyone could be on the deck to take the tow line.
The Flying Enterprise began to settle deeper in the water. This forced the two men to abandon the radio shack for Carlson's own cabin, which stood high on the starboard side. The gale continued unabated that night and the following morning, Thursday. The rescuers' hopes began to fade. The British tugboat Turmoil and the American destroyer Willard Keith, which had replaced the Weeks, urged Captain Carlson and Kenneth Dancy to abandon the Flying Enterprise, since it was still impossible to secure the tow. But they still hoped that conditions would improve and that they could reach Falmouth before nightfall. But Carlson was becoming worried about his ship. The creakings and vibrations in her hull had an increasingly ominous sound. A helicopter from the Royal Naval Air Station at Culdrose now took off at the request of Willard Keith's captain. The wind was very strong, but eventually the helicopter was picked up on Willard Keith's radar just 7 miles away. At that moment, Carlson radioed that his ship was about to go down. He and Dancy were seen scrambling down the side of the superstructure. But now the helicopter pilot radioed Willard Keith that he had reached the limit of his endurance and would have to turn back. The destroyer's captain told Turmoil that she would have to go in and rescue the two men. The Flying Enterprise had now listed to over 90 degrees, and the sea was pouring into her funnel. Turmoil now closed in. The nearest shore station radioed,
Taking full distress action. We are taking full distress action.
Willard Keith radioed the shore.
This is Keith. Roger, there are plenty of ships standing by to take Captain Carlson and Mr. Dancy off. We can see them both standing on the Flying Enterprise now. Over.
At that moment, Carlson and Dancy, both in life jackets, waved at Turmoil, walked along the now horizontal funnel, and then jumped hand in hand into the sea, which was now littered with the remnants of Flying Enterprise's cargo and other debris. Then came a welcome message.
This is the Willard Keith. Turmoil has rescued Captain Carlson and Mr. Dancy, both safely aboard. Over.
As the Flying Enterprise continued her dying struggles, Turmoil's crew gave Carlson and Dancy dry clothing and a hot drink. The two men then went up on deck once more to witness the last minutes of the Flying Enterprise. Gradually the ocean took hold of her, yet she still seemed to resist the ever-tightening watery grip in which she found herself. Watching a ship sink is poignant at any time, but for the crew of the Turmoil it was sadder than most, given their efforts to save her. For Carlson it was even harder, since it was his ship which was going down. Indeed, after a time, Carlson could not bear to watch any longer and was led below. More and more of the Flying Enterprise vanished beneath the surface. Finally, her bows briefly rose as if she were giving a farewell salute. She then disappeared from view and sank to her last resting place on the seabed. Her long agony was finally at an end.
Well, I thought that might be a good place to end with this. So Darrell, thank you so much for joining us today. And we wanted to give you one of our challenge
enjoyed it.
points. And please, everybody, come visit with Darrell afterwards and any other questions you might have. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's-